Here's a poem for you by Emily Dickinson, who was born in Amherst, Massachusetts in 1830. I heard a fly buzz when I died. The stillness in the room was like the stillness in the air between the heaves of storm. The eyes around had wrung them dry, and breaths were gathering firm for that last onset when the king be witnessed in the room. I willed my keepsakes, signed away, what portion of me be assignable. And then it was there interposed a fly, with blue, uncertain, stumbling buzz, between the light and me. And then the windows failed, and then I could not see to see. Welcome to the Crane Bag Podcast. I am Jay Leeming. Today we are going to explore a poem by Emily Dickinson. Thank you for joining me. Let us begin. Well, it's an amazing poem, isn't it? Let me give it to you again. But let me see if there's anything you need to know, seeing as you're not looking at it on the page, perhaps, as I am. I think it's pretty clear. I don't see any wild, French words or ancient Greek words. It mentions a king, capital K. As always with Emily Dickinson, she capitalizes words just pretty much whenever she feels like it, which is kind of a cool and eccentric and wonderful thing to do. All right then, here it is. I heard a fly buzz when I died. The stillness in the room was like the stillness in the air between the heaves of storm. The eyes around had wrung them dry, and breaths were gathering firm for that last onset when the king be witnessed in the room. I willed my keepsakes, signed away what portion of me be assignable. And then it was there interposed a fly, with blue, uncertain, stumbling buzz, between the light and me. And then the windows failed, and then I could not see to see. So, like I said, she capitalizes stuff all over the place. And she adds dashes as well. So the poem is in ballad meter, as we would say, meaning a rhythm that has come down to us from ballads from all kinds of places, but England in particular. And it's a rhythm she knew well and uses for pretty much all of her poems. I don't know if we need to go into it technically. I think you can just feel it, right? It's basically 4-3-4-3 as far as the accents go, with a pause in there. I heard a fly buzz when I died. The stillness in the room was like the stillness in the air between the heaves of storm. Now, we don't read it like that, do we? We don't. No, we read it naturally. But that pulse is beneath the words, and it will naturally be there in a way which does not hit us over the head, but gives us a music we hear as we experience this poem. And as always, I encourage you to read this poem yourself, because that is really to climb into the poem and to feel it in a way which you cannot quite do, even when you're hearing it from somebody else. It's spoken aloud. But, so that said, here we are. I heard a fly buzz when I died. The stillness in the room Now, stillness and room are both capitalized there. Was like the stillness in the air between the heaves of storm. Now, stillness is capitalized again. Air, heaves, storm. I'm not going to go through every darn one of them, but just to say, she's capitalizing all over the place. And then the eyes around had wrung them dry. So eyes, E-Y-E-S. Fascinating. The people around her are reduced to their eyes. That's what she notices most, perhaps. And breaths were gathering firm for that last onset when the king be witnessed in the room. So she doesn't really say people. The people around me were weeping, and their breaths were gathering firm. She sees them as eyes and breath. That's the thing she most notices. Notice how perception in this poem is so crucial. What is being witnessed, by whom, and how. It's all about attention, really, as I'm reading it now. What do we notice in this world? The newspaper description of this would be simply, a person died in a room. The mourners were there. They wept. But she's not interested in that sort of abstract description of an event, but she's interested in climbing into the event, living it from the inside out through her imagination. And this event is, of course, death. But such an interesting perception of it. It's really like we're there, like we're the one dying in the room, I would say. I willed my keepsakes, signed away, what portion of me be assignable. What a great way to put that, huh? So there's a part of her which is beyond this world and cannot be assigned, cannot be handed down, a part of her which will never be replaced. And that's a different portion than what she now assigns away. And then it was there interposed a fly with blue, uncertain, stumbling buzz between the light and me. And then the windows failed, and then I could not see to see. So she gets points for strangeness, I would say, which is something which poets, artists, musicians, folks of all kinds seek out. We're tired of the regular and we seek what is different and unusual. So when she says that the buzz of the fly was blue, that's certainly, that's unusual. But the deeper question is it also accurate? Is it also a accurate description of the buzz of a fly? And it's wonderful how these words, these adjectives, come before the buzz. There interposed a fly with blue, uncertain, stumbling buzz between the light and me. And then the windows failed, and then I could not see to see. It's just miraculous. So I find it quite, I'm fine with a blue buzz, It sounds great, and it feels like it's a beautifully smudgy description of the sound of the fly, uncertain and stumbling buzz. Does it matter that this fly is uncertain, that this fly is stumbling? This fly is not going through its life in a certain, proud, and sort of royal way, but is in fact struggling, uncertain, as we are uncertain in this life, as we sometimes stumble in this life. And it's as if it's an interruption, that in a more perfect world, some would say, there is just her and the light, and then she dies, and the light fails and she dies. It's as if a sort of ceremony is being interrupted here. It's like there's a funeral happening, which is more or less about to happen. There's a ritual of death, a procedure of death, which it should go a certain way. Everybody cries, she signs her will, and then she dies. That would be the expected sequence of events. But instead, we get this fly, which just comes in. Such a regular thing, such an everyday occurrence. An angel does not appear in a gold dress, A thunderbolt doesn't come down out of the sky, bang. There is no vision. I mean, this would be a place for vision right now. This would be a place for ultimate understanding, perhaps, of your life. Your life could flash before your eyes, or you could see the other world, you could really get it. This would be it, I mean, in literature, in life, that's what we kind of hope for, expect, and dread all at once, right? In the moment of death, it's all clear. But what happens to Emily Dickinson in this poem? What happens to, well, let's say the speaker of this poem? We don't get a vision of the miraculous, or do we? It's a miraculous of a different kind. The miraculous, perhaps, is this fly with blue, uncertain, stumbling buzz. The regular world persists. It speaks, it acts, and it comes to us, and it visits us, unbidden, just out of nowhere. It arrives. And perhaps this is an experience you've had. I know I have. I lived through my father's death and was there for that in a pretty full way. He died of emphysema. It took a while, So I moved home to be with him. And in doing that, I was part, all of us, my whole family, we were all part of this particular story, my father's story, which included us as well. And it had a pattern to it, and it had a emotion to it, the way it came to an end. But beyond that, there was the world, and the world persisted. The world kept going on. Cars were going by. Events were happening in the world. I'd go to the grocery store, and there were, children and their parents, and there was meat for sale and flowers and oranges. And it was both cruel and reassuring how the world went on, how the world does go on. The world doesn't care about this little death that is happening. But at the same time, that is a very reassuring and nourishing thing. For what if the world did stop? No, the world keeps going and keeps moving forward. It is beyond us, and we can never take it all in. And in this poem, the world speaks in the form of this fly who arrives and persists and goes on with its little life, despite the drama happening to the human beings in that room. And then after the fly, the windows fail. It's an amazing phrase, and then the windows failed. It's remarkable. I mean, notice in this poem how her attention, like where her attention is. This is death as an inner experience, not as an outer fact that you would read in the paper or on a website. This is the inner experience of death. And as such, we notice, I mean, it seems odd, but entirely right. What's failing is the person dying, right? The windows aren't failing, we could say. They're just windows. They're going on, or they're whatever. They're going to be smashed someday. But right now they're going on. And what's failing is the person in the bed. But that's not what our experience is, right? And she is true to that and expresses it in this poem. I think of waking up in the hospital after having my wisdom teeth taken out when I was a kid. The first experience I had of being put under, thankfully. Actually, my only experience. And just that feeling of like, the world goes away and the world returns, I don't know, it just comes to me now. The windows failed, and then I could not see to see. And notice how the rhythm and the meter of this, again, I come back to this question, which I've wrestled with on this podcast before, is how does form and content, how do they dance together? And what kinds of freedom are we talking about? We like to think of form as a sort of a cage, a prison. It will restrain us. It will prevent us from saying what we really have to say. But in fact, when we look at these amazing poems written in the past, many of them are liberated by their forms. And the speaker, the poet, is pushed towards saying things they might not have said otherwise. I could not see to see. I mean, she could have just ended, I could not see, if this was a sort of a free verse poem. But the rhythm demands two other syllables. It demands another beat. Who's to know who's in charge here? Who's to know if it is the rhythm and the meter which is driving the bus, or if it is the poet, Emily Dickinson? But she arrives at this miraculous expression, I could not see to see. And an expression like that in a poem, it's like it is the creation of Emily Dickinson, the poet, and of the form she has chosen. We think of poetry sometimes, perhaps, as if it's a stage and someone goes out there and they give this little speech. But perhaps it's more like swimming in the sea, where the form of the poem and the grip of the language around you is like the currents of that sea. Or perhaps it's a boat, a sailboat, which sails across the water, but only because it must reconcile the waves of the water and the wind, which are not always going exactly where you want them to go. But you must tack against that wind. You must wrestle with it, negotiate with it, just as a poet must negotiate with a form and reckon with it. And by doing so, you get to a new place, beyond what you could have gotten to, beyond any place you could have chosen for yourself. You find yourself at a new utterance, a new unexpected way of thinking and feeling. This poem was written in 1862 and not published till much later, till the 20th century. Emily Dickinson, as I said, born in 1830, died in 1886. And she and Walt Whitman are the two sort of ursprings, the two sources of American poetry, right? The two people who stand at the start of all of American poetry. There are other authors, of course, around them, of course, but they're the ones that really stand large as the two at the beginning of American poetry. And they could not be more different, you know. And it's just fantastic how different they are and how amazing they both are in their ways. I won't go into all the details of Emily Dickinson's life. You know, some of them you may know. She's sort of notorious for staying home, for not marrying, and remaining at the home in Amherst where she grew up. That's all true. People get a little crazy with that, I think. It makes the people like to think of this legend that she lived in a closet her whole life, and for that reason was strange. And I just think that's kind of ridiculous. She lived in that house, yes. She went outside, you know. She loved the garden outside, you know. Many of her poems are filled with nature. So I think many folks are a little too hard on her, harsh with her. She was her own woman and made her own choices. And I find her tremendously admirable in that regard. And when she is criticized for being a quote-unquote recluse, I feel in that a sort of larger American criticism of the inner life, of those who meditate, of those who go inward so as to heal not simply themselves, but the world. And so I find her to be more spiritually free and more liberated than many of us. There's the story of a school. In school, everyone was asked to testify to Jesus as the Savior, and she is the one who did not stand up and do that. She refused. She was a spiritual person, for sure. But I think in that moment, this is just my conjecture, but it was more likely the group think of that moment. It was more the pressure to all, testify to Jesus that she resisted in that moment. Emily Dickinson did not seek publication for her work. It was something she strenuously avoided. She completely did not want that. So in that sense, we might call her a pure poet, if there is such a thing. Her poems were sort of tidied up and changed and published posthumously in 1890 by Thomas Higginson, an editor she knew. But it was only until 1955 when they were published as she wrote them by Thomas H. Johnson in a terrific book, The Complete Poems of Emily Dickinson. Also, you can get, it's called Final Harvest. It's a selection of many of those, of her best work, I guess we would say. So I would just say, if you go seeking her work, which I hope you do, be careful a little bit and make sure you're getting the versions of her poems as she wrote them, as she meant them to be. Because you can still find, actually, all over the place online and in book form as well, these other versions which were changed by Higginson, sometimes adding words, definitely taking out a lot of the capitalization and the dashes, making them more normal. And, of course, it is exactly what is unusual and most original in them that we treasure about Emily Dickinson's poems. She said of publication that publication is the auction of the mind of man. That's from a poem she wrote. So auction for her at that time, and for many, was the slavery auction, selling slaves. So if you want to sell your brain, if you want to sell your heart and your feelings, well, go ahead. But that's what that is. When you publish something, you were selling yourself. So that's pretty clear. She was not into that. And she wrote her poems in a beautiful solitude, which includes, nevertheless, the entire cosmos within it. I'm going to leave you with another poem by Emily Dickinson, written in the same year, 1862. A poem which I think testifies to the immense size of the life she chose. And just feel in this poem how the little ripple begun at the beginning of this poem expands out like ripples in a pond to include all of creation. This poem, like all her poems, doesn't have a title, it just has a number. This is number 632. That was another sort of uncompromising action on her part, is not to give titles to her poems. She was not into that. So here we go. The brain is wider than the sky, for put them side by side, the one the other will contain with ease, and you beside. The brain is deeper than the sea, for hold them blue to blue, the one the other will absorb as sponges buckets do. The brain is just the weight of God, for heft them pound for pound, and they will differ, if they do, as syllable from sound. Thank you for listening to this podcast. There are more episodes on my website, which is jayleeming.com, JAYLEEMING.com. If you are able to support this podcast, please do so. You can do that at patreon.com/storyjo. Thanks for listening, and take care.